You ever see someone smile while they're about to ruin their own life? That's exactly what Linda Whitmore was doing when the metal clicked around my wrist. A cheap pair of cuffs biting just tight enough to make a point as half the neighborhood gathered on their driveways. Phones up, recording like it was some kind of Saturday entertainment. The low hum of a golf cart idling behind her fake officers. Their uniforms just close enough to reel to fool people who never bothered to look twice. And the smell of freshly cut grass hanging in the air like this was just another perfect HOA morning. Instead of the moment everything went sideways. "You're under arrest," she said, voice sweet and sharp at the same time. Like she'd practiced it in a mirror, and I didn't say a word. Not yet. Just felt the weight of the situation settle in. The texture of cold metal against my skin. The distant buzz of someone's lawnmower. A dog barking 2 houses down. Normal life, continuing while mine was being put on display. And that was the thing about Willow Creek Estates. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Identical mailboxes, identical lawns trimmed to exactly 2.5 inches, identical smiles that didn't reach the eyes. I'd only been here 3 weeks, just long enough to notice the pattern, just long enough to know Linda didn't enforce rules. She created them, bent them, used them like a weapon, and now she was escalating, stepping closer like she owned the ground I was standing on. Failure to comply with HOA enforcement directives. One of her guys read off a clipboard, his voice shaky, like even he didn't fully believe what he was saying. But Linda did. Oh, she believed every second of it. Her eyes locked on mine, waiting for me to react, to argue, to give her something she could twist into proof. But I stayed calm, because this right here, this moment, this was what I'd been waiting for. Every warning letter, every fine taped to my door, every inspection they forced on my property, it had all been building to this, and now they were doing it in front of witnesses, in front of cameras, in broad daylight, crossing a line they couldn't uncross. "You should have followed the rules," Linda said softly, leaning in just enough for only me to hear, her perfume sharp and expensive, masking something colder underneath, and I almost smiled, because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't been ignoring her. I'd been documenting her, every fake notice, every threat, every uniform that wasn't real law enforcement, and now, with those cuffs on my wrist and a dozen phones pointed at my face, they had just handed me something even better, something federal. I shifted slightly, feeling the small weight inside my jacket, still hidden, still waiting, and for the first time since she walked up my driveway, I spoke, calm, even, steady. "You might want to rethink this," I said, and she laughed, actually laughed, like she thought she'd already won. Like this was over, like I was just another homeowner she could push around. And somewhere down the street, faint at first but getting louder, I heard engines approaching, not golf carts this time. Something heavier, something official, and Linda didn't notice yet, but she was about to. The cuffs stayed on, but my hands did not move, not because I could not, but because I did not need to. The weight of them felt temporary, like a prop in a bad play, and around me the neighborhood leaned in closer. The soft crunch of gravel under shoes, the faint click of phone cameras adjusting focus, someone whispering my name like they suddenly realized this was not just another HOA warning. Linda straightened her posture like she was standing on a stage, chin slightly raised, shoulders back, playing authority down to the last detail. And her people mirrored her, 2 men in matching navy shirts with patches that looked official until you stared a second too long. The stitching slightly off, the badges too clean, like they had never seen real use. "You are being detained pending removal from the property." One of them repeated, louder this time, for the audience, and that word removal hung in the air heavier than it should have, because everyone here knew what that meant in Linda's version of the rules. It meant you disappeared from the neighborhood without a fight, your house listed quietly, your name erased from the group chat, and I could see it in their faces, that mix of curiosity and relief that it was not happening to them. Not today. The sun reflecting off windshields in perfect suburban rows. The smell of someone's barbecue grill starting up a few houses down. Normal life wrapped around something very wrong. I shifted my wrist slightly, feeling the edge of the cuff press against bone, not resisting, just reminding myself it was there. And then I looked at the man holding the clipboard, really looked this time, at the way his eyes avoided mine, at the slight tremor in his hand, at the way he kept glancing toward Linda before speaking. Waiting for approval like this was all borrowed confidence, And that told me everything I needed to know. They were not trained. They were not prepared. They were pretending. And pretending only works until someone asks the right question. Which department are you with? I asked calmly, my voice cutting through the low murmur around us. And for a second, just a second, the entire scene paused. The kind of pause you only notice when something important is about to shift. The man blinked, looked at Linda, then back at me. Homeowners Association enforcement, he said. Like that answered anything. And a few neighbors nodded like that sounded legitimate. Like that was a real thing, and Linda smiled again. Wider now, sensing she still had control. You should have complied when you had the chance, she added, her tone soft but carrying, designed to travel across lawns and into recordings. But I was not listening to her anymore. I was listening to the street, to the change in the air, to the distant engines growing louder, more defined now, not the soft electric whine of golf carts or the low rumble of pickup trucks, but something with weight, something with purpose. And I saw it in one neighbor's reflection first, in the curved surface of a polished SUV. Door, flashes of red and blue bending across chrome like distorted signals, and my pulse did not spike. It settled, steady and controlled, because timing was everything. Always had been. Linda took a step closer, invading space she thought she owned. This is your last chance to cooperate, she said. And there it was, the final push, the moment she committed fully, and I let out a slow breath, tasting the warm afternoon air, feeling the eyes on me, the cameras, the expectation, and then I lifted my gaze back to hers, calm, unshaken. You already crossed that line, I said quietly, and she frowned, just slightly, just enough to show confusion slipping through the cracks. And that was when the sound behind her became impossible to ignore. Doors opening, radios crackling, footsteps that did not hesitate. And for the first time since she walked onto my driveway, Linda Whitmore did not look in control anymore. The sound hit first, not loud, not dramatic, just precise. Doors closing with purpose, radios murmuring in clipped tones, the kind of controlled noise that does not belong to weakened neighborhoods. And every head turned at once like something invisible had shifted the gravity of the street. Linda froze for half a second before forcing her smile back into place, but it did not land the same. Not anymore. Because now even the people filming started lowering their phones just a little, unsure of what they were actually watching. I did not move. I did not need to. I just watched her, watched the moment stretch, watched the doubt creep in around the edges of her confidence like cracks in glass. One of her men took a step back without realizing it, his polished shoes scraping lightly against the concrete, and that tiny sound carried louder than it should have. Stay focused. Linda snapped under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. Then louder. This is still an HOA matter, she added, like saying it enough times would make it true. But the air had already changed. You could feel it, like pressure dropping before a storm. I glanced past her shoulder just once, just enough to confirm what I already knew. Dark vehicles lined neatly along the curb, doors open, figures stepping out in measured movements. No rush, no panic, just control. And that was the difference. Real authority never needed to shout. It just arrived and everything else adjusted around it. You should remove those restraints immediately. A voice called out, calm and even, not aggressive, not loud, but it carried the kind of voice people listen to without knowing why. Linda turned sharply, irritation flashing first before confusion replaced it, her eyes scanning the scene, trying to process, trying to regain ground she could already feel slipping away. This is private property, she said quickly, louder now, projecting again, clinging to the script she had built for herself. But no one answered her right away, and that silence was louder than anything she could have said. I could see it in the neighbors' faces, the shift from entertainment to realization, the slow understanding that this was not just another HOA dispute. This was something else entirely, something bigger, and Linda felt it too, her posture tightening, her hands moving just slightly like she did not know where to put them anymore. One of her men leaned toward her, whispering something I could not hear, but I saw her reaction, the quick shake of her head, the refusal, denial wrapped in determination, and that told me she was going to push it, she was going to double down, and that was exactly what I needed. I tilted my head slightly, feeling the cuff again, still in place, still part of the scene, still evidence. You might want to listen, I said quietly, not raising my voice, not changing my tone, and that got her attention more than anything else had. Because I was not reacting the way she expected, I was not angry, not defensive, just steady. And that unsettled her more than resistance ever could. Who do you think you are? She demanded, stepping closer again, trying to reclaim the space. But there was hesitation now, just enough to notice, and I met her gaze without blinking, letting the moment stretch just long enough for the people behind her to step fully into view, badges catching light. Not flashy, not exaggerated, just real. And I could feel the shift ripple through the crowd, whispers turning into silence, cameras lowering. And then I moved, slow, deliberate, reaching into my jacket, not rushed, not dramatic, just precise. And for the first time since this started, Linda did not speak. She just watched, and when I brought my hand back out, the small piece of metal in my grip caught the sun just enough to make her squint, confusion turning into something else, something colder, something heavier, and I held it there for a second, long enough for her to see it clearly, long enough for everything to settle into place. You were saying something about authority, I said evenly, and behind her, the silence became absolute. For a second, nobody moved, not Linda, not her people, not even the neighbors who had been whispering just moments ago, because the difference between something that looks official and something that is official is impossible to ignore once you see it, and she saw it now, the badge in my hand, the weight of it, the detail, the way I held it without hesitation, her eyes locked onto it like her mind was trying to rewrite what it meant. That is not, she started, but the words did not finish. Because deep down she already knew, and behind her, one of the real agents stepped forward, calm, measured, not rushing, not raising his voice, just present. "Ma'am, we need you to step aside," he said, and the tone alone was enough to shift everything. Linda straightened again out of instinct, clinging to the last pieces of control she thought she had. "This is a private community," she replied quickly, her voice tighter now, less polished. "We are handling a violation," and I almost respected the effort, almost, because doubling down in that moment took a certain kind of denial. But denial does not hold up against reality for long, especially not when reality is standing 10 feet behind you. "You are impersonating law enforcement," the agent said evenly, no emotion, just fact, and the word impersonating hit harder than anything else that had been said all morning. You could feel it ripple through the crowd, a shift from curiosity to discomfort, phones lowering further, people stepping back just slightly like they did not want to be part of this anymore. And Linda felt it too, her posture faltering for the first time, her eyes flicking between me, the badge, and the agents behind her, searching for something to hold on to. "We have authority here," she insisted, but it sounded different. Now, thinner, like the confidence had drained out of it. I lowered my hand slowly, the badge still visible, not hidden, not needed to be hidden anymore. "No, you do not," I said quietly, and that was the first time I saw real doubt cross her face, not irritation, not anger, but doubt, the kind that comes when a narrative collapses all at once. One of her men shifted again, taking another step back, his shoulders dropping like the weight of the uniform suddenly felt heavier, and the other avoided eye contact entirely, staring at the ground like he was hoping this would somehow pass without him being noticed. But it was too late for that. It had been too late the moment they put those cuffs on my wrist. The agent behind Linda nodded slightly toward me, a silent acknowledgement, then gestured toward the restraints, and another stepped forward, not aggressively, just professionally, unlocking them with a simple motion, the metal loosening, falling away without resistance, and the absence of that pressure felt lighter than it should have, like a signal that the balance had officially shifted. I rolled my wrist once, slow, controlled, then let my hand fall back to my side, and all eyes were on Linda now, waiting, watching, recording, because this was no longer her show. This was the part she had never planned for. "You should have checked who you were dealing with," I said, not as a threat, not as a boast, just a statement. And she opened her mouth like she was going to respond, but nothing came out, because there was nothing left to say that could fix this, nothing that could undo what had already been done. The fake badges, the uniforms, the public display, all of it documented, all of it witnessed, all of it now something else entirely. And as the agent stepped fully into position, calm and methodical, the neighborhood that had once felt like her territory no longer belonged to her at all. The street did not sound the same anymore. The easy background noise of suburban life replaced by something tighter, quieter, like everyone was holding their breath at the same time, and Linda stood there in the middle of it, not moving, not speaking, just staring at me like she was trying to force the moment to reverse. But moments like this do not rewind. They lock in. And the more she hesitated, the more control slipped away from her. One of the agents stepped past her, not brushing her, not acknowledging her position at all, just walking like she was no longer relevant to the situation. And that was the part that hit harder than anything. Authority ignored, not challenged, not argued, just bypassed. We are going to need identification from everyone involved. Another agent said, calm and direct, already holding a small notebook, pen ready, and Linda finally reacted, not with confidence this time, but with urgency. This is unnecessary, she said quickly, her voice rising just enough to betray it. This is a community enforcement action, and the words sounded hollow even as she said them, like she could hear how weak they had become. I watched her closely, not speaking, not stepping in, because this was not my part anymore. This was theirs, and the best thing I could do was let it unfold exactly as it needed to. One of her men fumbled for his wallet, pulling out an identification card that looked as temporary as the uniform he was wearing, his hand unsteady as he handed it over, and the agent glanced at it once, then again, slower this time, like he was confirming what he already suspected. This is not a recognized credential, he said simply, and that sentence landed with a weight that spread through the entire group. The second man did not even try to argue. He just stood there, shoulders slumped, eyes fixed somewhere near the ground, and Linda turned toward them sharply, as if their hesitation was the problem, as if this could still be held together if they just played their roles better. Do not cooperate, she snapped under her breath, but it was too late for that. The structure she had built was already collapsing, piece by piece, and everyone could see it, the neighbors especially, the same people who had been watching for entertainment now watching for something else entirely, realization settling in, the kind that makes you question how long something has been wrong without you noticing. I shifted my stance slightly, the absence of the cuffs still fresh, my wrist light, free, and I let my gaze move across the crowd, meeting eyes briefly, not accusing, not reassuring, just present, because this was bigger than me now. This was about everything Linda had been doing behind the label of community standards, and it was all coming into focus at once. Ma'am, the lead agent said again, addressing her directly this time. We need you to step over here. And he gestured calmly toward the curb, not aggressive, not forceful, just final. And for a moment she did not move, her pride holding her in place. But then she did, one small step, then another, each one slower than the last, like she was trying to preserve something that was already gone. And as she stepped away from the center of the scene, the shift became complete, the invisible line between her authority and theirs drawn clearly for everyone to see, and it was not even close. I exhaled slowly, the tension in the air easing just enough to feel. And as I watched the agents begin their work, methodical, precise, I knew this was only the beginning of what was about to unfold, because what they had done here, in front of witnesses, on camera, in broad daylight, was not just a mistake, it was a record, and records do not disappear. The shift did not stop with Linda stepping aside. It spread, slow and undeniable, like a ripple moving through still water, and now every small detail started to matter. The radios clipped to those fake uniforms, the patches stitched just slightly off-center, the clipboard with printed violations that suddenly looked less official and more like props, and the agents saw it all, not rushing, not reacting emotionally, just observing, documenting, turning everything into something that could not be argued later. One of them walked toward the golf cart parked crooked at the edge of my driveway, glancing at the light bar mounted on top, the cheap wiring exposed if you looked close enough, and he crouched slightly, not touching, just examining, then stood and gave a small nod to his partner, a silent exchange that said everything without a single word spoken. Linda noticed that, her eyes tracking every movement. Now, no longer in control, but desperate to understand how much they had already seen, how much they already knew. This is being taken out of context, she said quickly, trying to regain ground, her voice sharper now, less composed. We are authorized by the community bylaws. And the way she said bylaws like it was equal to law enforcement almost made me shake my head. But I stayed still, because this was not about correcting her anymore. This was about letting her keep talking, letting her add to the record she had already started building against herself. Community bylaws do not grant detention authority. The lead agent replied calmly, writing something down as he spoke, not even looking up right away. And that was the moment it clicked for everyone watching. The difference between what she believed and what was real. A neighbor near the sidewalk lowered his phone completely, his expression shifting from curiosity to something closer to concern, and another stepped back toward his porch, like distance might separate him from what was unfolding. I could hear the faint buzz of a notification from someone's phone. The HOA group chat probably lighting up with confusion, questions, maybe even panic, and Linda felt that too. Her control slipping beyond just this moment, beyond just this street. We were protecting property values, she added, her tone changing again, softer now, almost defensive, like she was searching for something that would still sound reasonable, but it landed flat, because protecting property values does not involve handcuffs, it does not involve staged authority, and it definitely does not involve public displays like this. One of the agents stepped closer to her, not aggressively, just enough to keep the conversation contained. "We are going to need access to your documentation," he said, and she hesitated, just long enough to confirm what I already suspected. Because if everything she had done was legitimate, there would be no hesitation, there would be no delay, but instead she glanced toward her house, toward the direction of the HOA office down the street, calculating, weighing options that no longer existed, and that pause spoke. Louder than anything she could have said, I shifted my gaze briefly toward the neighbors again, noticing how the energy had completely flipped. No more whispers of agreement with Linda, no more nods of quiet support, just silence, observation, and a growing understanding that they had all been part of something they did not fully see until now. And that was the thing about power when it is built on illusion. It holds until the moment it is questioned in the right way, and then it does not just weaken, it collapses all at once. "We can resolve this internally," Linda said finally, her voice lower, more controlled again, trying to salvage what she could, but the agent shook his head once, not dismissive, just certain. "That is not how this works," he replied, and I felt the weight of that sentence settle into the scene, final and clear, because from this point on, nothing about this was internal anymore. Nothing about this was private. It had crossed into something larger, something that did not answer to HOA meetings or neighborhood votes. And as I stood there, the afternoon sun still warm, the street still lined with perfect houses and identical lawns, it felt almost surreal how quickly everything had changed, how something that started as a staged display of control had turned into a real investigation, right in the middle of a quiet suburban block, and Linda Whitmore, who had once ruled this place without question, was now standing at the edge of it, watching it all slip away piece by piece. By now, the street was no longer watching a scene. It was watching a truth unfold, slow and unavoidable, and the difference was written all over every face. The quiet confidence that once surrounded Linda replaced by something fragile, something uncertain, and I could see it in the way she stood now, no longer centered, no longer commanding, just positioned slightly off to the side like she had been moved without realizing it. The agents did not rush her. They did not need to. They simply continued, one step at a time, building a picture that did not rely on her version of events. One of them holding up one of the printed violation notices, the paper fluttering slightly in the warm breeze, the ink bold but suddenly meaningless under closer inspection. "Who issued this?" he asked, and Linda hesitated again. That same pause that had started to define her responses. "The board approved it," she said finally, but her voice lacked the certainty it once had, and the agent nodded once, writing something down without comment, because it was not about arguing, it was about recording. Another agent approached the two men who had been standing behind her earlier, the ones who wore authority like a costume, and now that costume did not fit anymore. Their posture gave it away, shoulders rounded, eyes uncertain. One of them swallowing hard before speaking. "We were told this was standard," he said quietly, almost like he was explaining it to himself, and that sentence hung in the air heavier than anything else, because it revealed the structure underneath all of this. Not just one person pushing limits, but a system that had convinced others it was normal, that it was allowed. And I let that sink in, because that was the real story here, not the moment, but how long it had been building to it. I took a slow breath, the air still warm, still carrying that faint scent of cut grass and asphalt, but now mixed with something else, something sharper, awareness, and I stepped forward just slightly, not to take over, not to interrupt, but to be part of the space again, no longer the subject of it. You built an enforcement unit, I said, my voice even directed at Linda, and she looked at me immediately, almost relieved to have something familiar to respond to, something she could push against. We created a structure to maintain standards. She replied quickly, clinging to that language, but it sounded rehearsed now, detached from reality. With uniforms, badges, and detention? I asked, not raising my voice, just placing the facts where everyone could hear them. And that was enough. The neighbors shifted again, some exchanging looks, others staring at Linda like they were seeing her for the first time, and she felt that. I could see it in the way her jaw tightened, in the way her eyes flicked around the crowd, searching for support that was no longer there. You do not understand how difficult it is to manage a community like this, she said, her tone changing again, almost defensive, almost pleading, and for a brief second, the image she had built cracked enough to show something underneath it, something human, but it did not change anything, because intent does not erase action, and structure does not justify overreach. The lead agent stepped closer again, holding a small evidence bag now, placing one of the fake badges inside with careful precision, sealing it without ceremony. And that simple act carried more weight than anything said so far, because it turned everything from opinion into record, from claim into proof. Linda watched it happen, her eyes fixed on that small clear bag like she was realizing what it meant, not just for this moment, but for everything connected to it, the meetings, the notices, the authority she had exercised without question, all of it now subject to something beyond her control. And the silence around us deepened, not empty, but full of realization, full of consequence. And as I stood there, no longer restrained, no longer questioned, I knew this was the point where everything shifted permanently, not just for Linda, but for everyone who had accepted her version of authority without ever asking where it came from. What broke her was not the badge, not the agents, not even the neighbors watching in silence. It was the paperwork, the quiet stack of documents one of the agents pulled from a plain folder and began laying out on the hood of a parked car like pieces of a puzzle that had already been solved, each page aligned carefully, each line highlighted with a precision that did not leave room for interpretation. And I watched Linda's eyes follow every movement, not fully understanding yet, but sensing the weight of it, sensing that this was something she could not talk her way out of. We have been tracking complaints tied to this address for over 90 days, the lead agent said, his voice steady, not accusing, just stating facts. And that number hung in the air longer than anything else had. 90 days, 3 months, long before I ever stepped onto this street as just another homeowner. And that was the moment the final piece clicked into place for the people watching. This was not sudden. This was not accidental. This had been building, documented, observed, and allowed to reach exactly this point. I shifted slightly, letting the words settle, letting the realization spread without interruption, because this was the part no one ever expects. The part where the story they think they are in turns out to be something else entirely. Multiple reports of unauthorized enforcement actions, misuse of identification, and coercive compliance tactics. The agent continued, turning one of the pages just enough for Linda to see the highlighted lines, and her expression changed again, not just doubt now, but recognition, like she was seeing her own actions reflected back in a way she could not deny. That is not accurate, she said quickly, but her voice lacked direction, lacked the sharp edge it once had, and the agent did not respond right away. He simply pointed to a section of the page, then another, letting the paper speak for itself, and that silence forced her to confront it in a way words never could. One of the neighbors let out a quiet breath, almost a sigh, like something they had suspected but never confirmed was now undeniable, and I could feel the shift fully settle, the last traces of her influence dissolving in real time. I stepped forward just enough to stand beside the agent, not in front, not taking over, just present as part of what had always been in motion. You built a system that looked real, I said, my voice calm, not confrontational, and she looked at me again, her eyes searching for something, anything that could anchor her. It worked because no one questioned it. I added, and that landed harder than anything else, because it was not just about her. It was about everyone who had accepted it, everyone who had followed without asking why. The agent closed the folder slowly, deliberate, final. At this point, we are transitioning this from observation to formal action, he said, and that sentence carried a different kind of weight. Not immediate, not explosive, but permanent, the kind that does not fade. When the moment ends, Linda's shoulders dropped just slightly, the fight leaving her posture in a way that was almost imperceptible but impossible to miss once you saw it. And around us, the neighborhood stood still, no longer participants, no longer spectators, just witnesses to something that had already gone further than anyone expected. I looked down the street one last time. The identical houses, the trimmed lawns, the quiet order that had once defined this place. And for the first time, it felt honest, not perfect, not controlled, just real. And as the agents began to move with quiet efficiency, collecting, documenting, turning everything into record, I knew this was the moment where it all shifted from story to consequence, from appearance to reality. And there was no version of events where Linda Whitmore walked away from this with the authority she once believed she had. The movement after that was quiet, almost understated, but it carried more weight than everything that came before it. The agents did not raise their voices. They did not rush. They simply continued, step by step, turning what had once been Linda's controlled environment into something structured, documented, and completely out of her hands. One of them guided her a few feet further from the center of the street, not forceful, just clear, creating space between her and the scene she used to command, and that distance said more than any words could. The neighbors remained where they were, but they were different now, no longer leaning in, no longer whispering support, just watching, absorbing, recalibrating everything they thought they knew about the place they lived in. I could see it in the way they stood, in the silence that had replaced the earlier noise, in the lowered phones that no longer felt like tools for entertainment, but records of something real, something that mattered. I let my gaze drift across the street one more time, taking it in, the identical driveways, the trimmed hedges, the quiet symmetry that had once masked what was happening underneath. And for the first time since I arrived here, it felt like the surface matched the truth, not perfect, not controlled, just honest. The lead agent closed the folder and handed it off to another without a word. A simple exchange that marked the shift from gathering to processing, from observation to consequence. And I felt the weight of that moment settle in. Not heavy, not overwhelming, just final. Linda stood still now, no longer speaking, no longer directing, her posture smaller somehow, like the space around her had expanded while she remained in place. And I watched her for a second, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just recognition, because this was never about one moment. It was about everything that led to it, every unchecked decision, every line crossed without question, every person who went along with it because it seemed easier than pushing back. And now all of it was here, visible, undeniable. I took a slow breath, the air steady, the afternoon unchanged except for the meaning layered into it. And I stepped back slightly, giving the agents full space, because my part in this had always been simple: observe, wait, let it unfold, and when the time came, make sure the truth had room to surface. One of the agents glanced toward me briefly, a small acknowledgement, nothing more, then turned back to the work at hand. And that was enough. No words needed, no explanation required. Everything that needed to be understood was already clear. I looked down at my wrist once, the faint impression from the cuff still there, already fading, and it struck me how temporary it all had been, how quickly something designed to control could turn into evidence instead. And I let my hand fall back to my side, relaxed, steady, as the last pieces of the scene settled into place. The vehicles, the notes, the quiet coordination that replaced chaos without ever raising its voice. And as I turned slightly toward my front door, not rushing, not leaving, just shifting back into my own space, I realized something simple, something that did not need to be said out loud. Power does not come from how loud you claim it, or how many people believe it. It comes from what holds up when it is questioned. And here, in the middle of a quiet street where everything once looked perfect, the truth had finally been tested, and it held, not with noise, not with force, but with clarity, and that was enough.